The parking garage was silent, only the drip of water echoing off the concrete. Alexander Hayes pressed the unlock button on his Mercedes, shoulders heavy from a day of battles at Hayes Tech, his $300 million empire. He slid inside, inhaling the familiar scent of leather comfort, power, routine. His finger hovered over the ignition when a sharp, trembling voice from the back shattered the quiet. "Shut up." His chest clenched, a child's command. He spun, breath caught. An 80-year-old girl sat curled in the shadows of his back seat, eyes wide like a cornered deer, braids fraying against her cheeks. "Don't speak," she hissed, fear pressing every word. "If they hear us, you're finished." The air thickened. The Rocky Mountains loomed outside the slits of the garage, a dark crown over Denver's restless streets. Alexander's pulse pounded louder than the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Who put you here?" His voice cracked lower than he wanted. The girl leaned forward, her whisper a blade. "Victor Lang, Sophia Reed. They laughed about it. They said tomorrow you'll sign, you won't even read. And then," she swallowed hard, "everything you built is gone." Alexander's hand trembled on the wheel. 18 years beside Victor, 12 trusting Sophia. Loyalty carved in decades now threatened by a stranger's frightened child. The girl's clothes were worn thin, her eyes desperate, yet steady. "They're coming for you," she said, "and I'm the only reason, you know." The garage door groaned somewhere above. Olia shrank into the seat, clutching her knees. Alexander stared, his empire tilting under a child's warning. Why would a girl with nothing risk her life to save a man she didn't know? And what secret tied her fate to his?
The alarm rattled on the chipped nightstand, its plastic surface yellowed from years of use. And Elias Hart woke with the heaviness of another Charleston morning pressing on his shoulders. The apartment was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator, and the gentle rhythm of rain sliding down the window. He sat up slowly, running a hand across his tired face, and glanced toward the small room across the hall, where a splash of pink paint marked his daughter's door. Slept curled in her blanket, a stuffed rabbit pressed against her cheek, her hair tangled from dreams that never seemed to trouble her. Elias envied that peace. At 34, life had become a constant balancing act, overdue bills stacked beside grocery lists. Hopes for stability weighed against relentless reality. Their apartment was cramped, 2 rooms and a kitchen barely, large enough for both of them to move without bumping shoulders. Faded wallpaper peeled near the ceiling, and the carpet bore the ghosts of stains that had outlasted previous tenants. On the coffee table, Lila's crayons sprawled in a messy rainbow, their paper wrappers peeling back, tiny bits of wax ground into the fibers of the rug. Each mark she left behind reminded Elias of why he kept going. He slipped into the kitchen, careful not to wake her, and poured coffee into a mug chipped along the rim. The bitterness steadied him. Today was not an ordinary day. Today was the interview at Palmetto Solutions, a position that could alter everything. Director of Operations. The title felt heavy, unreal, as though he might break it simply by holding on too tightly. He set his mug down, smoothing the only tie he owned against his shirt. The silk was frayed at the edges, threads curling from years of wear, he pressed. The shirt last night with an iron that sputtered steam unevenly, but the creases remained stubborn. He looked at himself in the mirror above the sink, a man weathered by responsibility, eyes tired but sharp, jawline shadowed by stubble he hadn't had time to shave properly. From the other room came the creak of floorboards, then the soft patter of small feet. "Daddy," Lila said sleepily, rubbing her eyes. Her pajamas were dotted with faded stars. She climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs and smiled. "You look like a businessman." He chuckled, tugging at his worn tie. "Let's hope they think so too." She tilted her head. "You'll get it, I know." Confidence radiated from her in a way that always humbled him. She had no idea how much rode on today, how much depended on whether he impressed the panel in that glass building downtown. He packed her school lunch with the precision of habit. Sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a bruised apple, and the last of the crackers from the cupboard. He wished he could give her more, something brighter, fresher. But she didn't complain, never did.
Oh.
She simply swung her legs beneath the chair, humming a tune from the cartoon she loved. As he tied her shoes, her small hands rested on his shoulders, warm and steady. "Don't worry," she whispered. "It's going to be okay." He kissed her forehead, swallowing the lump in his throat. By the time they left the apartment, the rain had thickened, soaking the city in sheets. Charleston carried the scent of wet stone and magnolia blossoms crushed by the storm. They splashed through puddles to the school 2 blocks away, Elias holding an umbrella that fought against the wind. He kissed Lila goodbye at the gate, her small frame swallowed by her raincoat, then turned toward downtown with determination burning under his ribs. Traffic snarled near the historic district, where cobblestones turned slick beneath tires. Elias jogged through the rain, clutching the folder that held his resume, his shoes squelching with each step. The storm blurred the pastel facades of old houses, Rotterdam balconies dripping with water, palmetto trees bending low. His phone buzzed, a reminder that the interview began in less than 30 minutes. His chest tightened. Then he saw it. A car was stranded in a shallow flood near the curb, hazard lights blinking frantically. Beside it, a woman stood with one heel broken. Her other foot braced awkwardly against the wet pavement. Her blazer clung to her shoulders, dark with rain, and a leather bag sagged from her arm. She tried to wave down a taxi, but none stopped. The storm had scattered most pedestrians. Elias slowed, torn. Every second mattered. But the woman's ankle bled where the heel had snapped, red streaks diluted by rainwater. She muttered under her breath, trying to maintain control. But the tremor in her hands betrayed the effort. He approached, his voice cautious. "Are you all right?" She stiffened, embarrassment flashing across her face. "I'm fine," she said, though the wince that followed contradicted her words. She shifted her weight, nearly slipping, and caught herself against the car door. He could see the struggle in her posture, someone used to command, unaccustomed to weakness in public. Her eyes darted to him, guarded, as though debating whether to accept help from a stranger. "I can take a look," Elias offered, adjusting the folder under his arm. "It's nothing," she murmured, brushing damp hair from her face.
Accent.
Carried refinement, each word clipped with precision. The designer bag on her shoulder, the cut of her suit, the shine of her jewelry all spoke of a world far removed from Elias's frayed tie and soaked jacket. Yet here they were, 2 lives colliding in the storm. He crouched slightly, careful not to startle her, and examined the ankle. The cut was shallow, but bleeding. "You should get this cleaned," he said. She hesitated, pride battling practicality, then finally nodded. "Clara," she introduced herself quietly, as though the name should mean something. He smiled faintly. "Elias." The taxi finally slowed, but Clara waved it on. She seemed reluctant to appear vulnerable to anyone else, and something about Elias's steady tone had disarmed her. "There's a cafe just ahead," he said. "Warm, dry, and we can fix that ankle properly." She bit her lip, glancing at the stalled car, then at him. "You don't need to trouble yourself," she insisted. He glanced at his watch, heartbeat pounding. Every instinct screamed to run for the interview, to salvage the chance waiting across town. That Lila's words echoed in his mind. "Don't worry, it's going to be okay," he exhaled. "It's no trouble." His certainty surprised even him. Clara studied him, the rain sliding down her face, and after a long pause, she allowed him to guide her forward. Together they stepped through the storm, his arm steadying her, her polished shoes ruined by the water, the city's chaos blurred. Around them, horns honking, thunder rumbling, but in that moment, the urgency of his schedule dissolved. As they reached the cafe's awning, Elias held the door open, letting warmth spill onto. The bell above the cafe door gave a soft chime as Elias guided Clara inside. Warmth wrapped around them, a sharp contrast to the storm still battering Charleston streets. The windows were fogged from heat-meeting rain, beads of moisture trailing down the glass. Outside, gas lamps flickered stubbornly against the downpour, their halos blurred. The air smelled of roasted beans, baked bread, and something sweet cooling behind the counter. Clara hesitated just inside the doorway, her shoulders stiff beneath the damp fabric of her blouse. She looked every bit the woman who had been pulled from a world of control into chaos, and now found herself uncomfortable with surrendering even a fragment of power. Elias motioned toward a booth near the back where the light was softer. She nodded curtly, leaning slightly on him as she walked, though her jaw was tight, as if acknowledging her need for help cost her more than the pain itself. He pulled a chair for her, setting her designer bag gently on the seat beside her. She murmured thanks, eyes darting around the cafe as if cataloging exits, judging faces. Elias crouched, pulling napkins from the dispenser. He dug into his pocket and pulled out the small first aid pouch he carried, its edges frayed. He unwrapped antiseptic wipes with steady hands and looked up. This might sting. Clara nodded, lifting her ankle onto the seat. He worked carefully, dabbing at the cut. Her polished composure slipped as she flinched, lips pressing together until the moment passed. "You carry this around?" she asked, watching his hands. Elias shrugged. "With a kid, you learn to keep the basics. Bandages fix more than scraped knees." Her gaze lingered on his face, softened just for a moment. "You're a father, single father," he corrected gently. "Leela's 7. Brightest part of my world." A faint smile flickered at his lips as he spoke her name, a warmth threading into the air. Clara shifted, her polished exterior cracking again as curiosity pushed past reserve. "That can't be easy." "It isn't," Elias admitted, winding. "Gauze with practiced care. Some months, I skip paying one bill to cover her school supplies. Some nights I wonder if the lights will still be on by morning. But she deserves more than excuses, so I keep moving." Clara lowered her gaze to her lap, fingers twisting together briefly before she stilled them. Her silence carried weight, the kind that came when words seemed dangerous. Elias leaned back, inspecting the neat bandage. "There," he said softly. "Good as new, or close to it." She studied the wrap, then his face, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. "You didn't have to do this," she said. He offered a lopsided grin. "Maybe not. But it looked like you needed someone." The waitress approached, setting down 2 steaming mugs without asking. Elias inhaled the centric, earthy grounding. Claire wrapped her hands around the ceramic, absorbing its heat. Outside, the rain slowed, church bells pealing faintly from somewhere beyond the square. For a long moment, the cafe felt like its own pocket of time, removed from urgency. Clara finally asked, "What about the child's mother?" Elias's smile dimmed. "Gone. She left when Lila was 2. Too much weight? Not enough patience. Haven't heard from her since." The bluntness carried no bitterness, just exhaustion. Clara studied him carefully, but when he glanced up, she quickly looked away, as though she hadn't meant to pry. He sipped the coffee, feeling its burn down his throat. "Lila asks about her sometimes. I tell her people leave for reasons we can't always understand, but it doesn't mean she's not loved." His voice softened, the edges roughened by memory. Clara's fingers tightened around the mug. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in her armor, but she masked it with a sip. "And today," she asked, "what was so urgent for you to be out in that storm?" Elias hesitated, torn between honesty and pride. He chose the first. A job interview. Director role. It could change everything for us. I was late already. Clara blinked, her jaw tensing. "And you still stopped?" He smiled faintly, though his chest ached. "Some things matter more." For a beat, the cafe hushed around them, as though waiting for her response. She didn't offer one. Instead, she redirected, her questions light, probing around edges. "Leela," she said, testing the name. "What's she like?" Elias brightened. "Fearless. She painted our kitchen wall with stars once, convinced it would make wishes come true. Loves rabbits. Thinks I can fix anything, even when I can't." His words carried affection so pure that Clara shifted, pressing her lips together. Her silence wasn't dismissive, but protective, as if revealing anything of herself might undo. The waitress refilled their cups. Elias leaned back, stretching his stiff shoulders. The clock above the counter read later than he wanted, his chest tightened. He should be running across town, apologizing, begging for another chance. But Clara's ankle rested firmly against the cushion, her posture slowly softening as she allowed the warmth of the cafe to seep into her bones. Something in her presence asked him to stay, though she hadn't voiced it. He tapped the rim of his mug thoughtfully, Ever helped someone when it cost you? Share in the comments. The words slipped from him almost unconsciously, as though voicing the question into the cafe air might justify his own choice. Clara tilted her head, studying him. That's an unusual way to think, she said. Maybe, he replied, but kindness is the only currency that grows when you spend it. Her eyes flickered, unreadable. She sipped her coffee again, letting the bitterness linger. You speak like someone who's lost much. Elias met her gaze evenly. Loss teaches. You two hold tighter to what matters. The silence stretched, filled only by the clatter of dishes and the murmur of other patrons. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was the quiet of two strangers testing the fragile bridge between them. Outside, the rain eased into a drizzle, gas lamps casting soft halos across the slick street. Elias watched the clock again. Time bled away faster than he wanted. His stomach clenched, but when Clara shifted, grimacing slightly at her bandaged ankle, he remained seated. She caught him watching the clock and frowned. You should go. Whatever you had planned, don't lose it because of me. Elias shook his head slowly. I'll be fine. His words carried weight, though uncertainty gnawed at him. Clara pressed. Her lips together, clearly unconvinced, yet didn't argue further. Instead, she leaned back, her eyes distant. For the first time, the cafe hummed with a quiet rhythm, spoons clinking softly against porcelain mugs, the muted shuffle of shoes across tile. Elias sat across from Clara, his shoulders damp from the rain, his folder of resumes wilting on the seat beside him. His phone buzzed once, then again vibrating insistently as if mocking his hesitation. He glanced at the glowing screen. The time bled away faster than he could process. 20 minutes had passed since the start of the interview. Palmetto Solutions. The chance that could shift the entire course of his and Lila's lives. That ticked further out of reach with every second he stayed seated. His chest tightened, his pulse rising like the tide pressing against Charleston's waterfront. Yet, when his gaze dropped to Clara's ankle wrapped in gauze he had carefully secured, his hands remained steady. She noticed the way his eyes kept flicking to the phone. Her expression was unreadable, but the faint crease between her brows betrayed her awareness. You should go, she said quietly. Her voice clipped, as if urging him away would cost her something she didn't want to name. Whatever appointment you had, don't let me keep you from it. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup, knuckles pale against porcelain. Elias shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line. If I leave you here, what does that make me? And someone who walked away when it mattered most? Clara shifted, clearly unused to resistance. It makes you practical, she replied, though the firmness in her tone didn't disguise the tremor underneath. I can manage from here. Go. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it, tucking it face down on the table. My daughter's been teaching me something, he said, his voice low but sure. That doing right doesn't wait for convenience. She once told me that kindness is worth more than being on time. A faint, almost invisible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She's 7, but sometimes I think she knows the world better than I do. Clara's gaze lingered on him, her eyes softening despite herself. The cafe's warmth wrapped around them as the storm outside softened into drizzle, church bells tolling faintly through the damp air. Somewhere in the distance, muffled, jazz floated down the street, carried by the slow return of life after the storm. The world seemed to exhale, yet inside Elias's chest, the conflict raged louder than ever. He imagined Lila's face when he'd promised her things would change, the light in her eyes when she believed in him. He thought of the overdue bills, piled on the kitchen counter, the thin groceries in the cupboard. Missing this interview could mean another year of scraping by, another year of telling his daughter maybe next time. He pressed a palm against his thigh, steadying the shake in his leg. Still, when Clara winced slightly as she adjusted her ankle, he reached forward without hesitation, checking the wrap, his movements gentle but precise. You're relentless, she said, studying him. He chuckled softly. Stubborn, maybe. Relentless is when you refuse to leave someone to struggle alone. Her eyes searched his face, guarded curiosity giving way to something warmer, something she seemed almost unwilling to admit. The waitress returned with a plate of scones, setting it between them. Elias thanked her quietly, his voice grounded, though inside the conflict clawed at him. He broke a piece of bread absent-mindedly, but didn't eat. Clara leaned back, her blazer draped across the booth, her composure slowly rebuilding, though cracks remained visible. "You are throwing something away, aren't you?" she asked, her tone softer now. Elias's chest ached at the truth in her words. Maybe. Or maybe I'm investing in the only thing that matters, being the kind of person my daughter believes I am. He glanced at the window where droplets traced winding paths down glass illuminated by gaslight. "What would you give up for a stranger? Tell us below." The words slipped from him like a thought he couldn't contain, and he realized how deeply the question pressed against his own heart. Clara tilted her head, curiosity deepening. "Not everyone would. Most wouldn't," Elias admitted. "But Lila would never forgive me if she knew I walked past someone who needed help. And if I can't teach her by example, then what? Kind of father am I?" His voice was steady, but inside, the weight pressed harder with every minute. Silence stretched, but it was no longer sharp. It carried a strange intimacy, as though they both understood the gravity of his choice without speaking further. Outside, the rain tapered off completely, leaving the streets glistening under lamps. Reflections shimmering on the cobblestones like scattered stars. A carriage rolled past, its wheels hissing against wet stone, the sound mingling with distant laughter from those brave enough to re-emerge after the storm. Charleston exhaled beauty, oblivious to the small storm unfolding inside the cafe. Elias finally picked up his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. One missed call, then another. A message from Palmetto Solutions. "Interview has commenced. Please arrive if possible." His throat tightened. He locked the screen and set the phone aside. Clara's eyes followed the movement, sharp with awareness. The apartment door groaned as Elias pushed it open, the sound echoing in the small space, like an unwelcome reminder of how little in his life worked smoothly. The scent of damp fabric clung to him as he set his soaked jacket across the back of a chair, the faded cushions sagging under the weight. He placed his folder on the table and stared at it. The edges curled from the storm, pages warped. That folder had been his chance, his ticket into Palmetto Solutions, and now it sat ruined, as though mocking his choice. The apartment was silent, except for the steady drip of the kitchen faucet, each drop striking the metal sink with maddening precision. He turned toward the fridge, its white surface covered with Lila's colorful drawings. Crayon suns with two, many raised crooked rabbits with wide smiles. Stars scattered across uneven skies, all taped proudly as though they were museum pieces. His chest tightened as he studied them, the innocence they carried pressing against the weight of his failure. He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion pulling at his bones. The couch sagged beneath him as he sank down, staring at the ceiling, where faint stains spread across plaster like ghosts of old leaks. Doubt clawed at him. Had he just thrown away Lila's future? That interview had been the culmination of weeks of preparation, late nights rehearsing answers, mornings spent ironing shirts that refused to look crisp, all while convincing himself that one chance could change their lives. He thought of the conference room he would never step into, the men and women in tailored suits reviewing his empty chair, his absence sealing their decision. The faucet dripped again. He closed his eyes, hearing the echo of Clara's voice telling him he would regret it. Maybe she was right. Maybe kindness had cost him more than he could afford. Yet beneath the swell of regret, another truth pulsed quietly. He had chosen to act the way he wanted his daughter to believe people should act. That counted for something, didn't it? He rose and walked into the kitchen, opening the cupboard to reveal shelves nearly bare. A half-empty box of cereal, a can of beans, and a few packets of rice. He sighed and shut the door gently, unwilling to let despair consume him. The sunlight filtering through the window had softened now, no longer gray from the storm. Charleston lay painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun descended over the Ashley River. The glow touched rooftops, danced across water, and reflected into the apartment like a promise that beauty could exist even in disappointment. Elias leaned against the counter, letting the scene outside calm the tightness in his chest. He remembered the way Leela had waved goodbye that morning, her raincoat too big, her voice filled with faith. "You'll get it, Daddy," she had said. And now he had to return to her with nothing. His phone buzzed on the table, a final notification from Palmetto Solutions. "Thank you for your interest. The position has been filled." His throat tightened as he locked the screen. The decision was final. His sacrifice had no undoing. From the hallway came the sound of Leela's small footsteps. She entered the kitchen, hair tousled from play, holding her stuffed rabbit. "You're back," she said brightly. "Did you get the job?" The question pierced him deeper than he expected. Crouched to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not today, sweetheart." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't let go of her smile. "That's okay. You'll try again." The unwavering faith in her tone nearly undid him. He forced a nod, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Yes, I'll try again." She hopped onto a chair, swinging her legs. "Made another drawing," she said, pointing toward the fridge. A fresh paper had been taped there, covered with stars and a house beneath them. "It's us. See? You, me, and Mr. Rabbit. We're under the stars so we can make wishes." Elias swallowed the lump in his throat. "What did you wish for?" She grinned, gap-toothed and proud. "For you to be happy." The faucet dripped. Again, he tightened it, though it never truly stopped. His eyes burned, but he steadied himself. "That's a good wish," he whispered. They ate a simple dinner together, rice and beans that Lila seasoned with too much salt, laughing when he pretended to cough dramatically. He let the moment carry him, determined to give her the sense that life was steady even when it wasn't, single quotes. Later, as twilight deepened and the city's lamps flickered to life outside, Elias guided Lila toward her small bedroom. The walls were plastered with her artwork. Stars and animals layered one atop another, her way of remaking the world to her own. Liking, he tucked her into bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. The rabbit rested at her side, its fabric worn thin but loved beyond measure. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "It's going to be okay, Daddy. You always say that?" He smiled softly, brushing her hair back. "It is. Things will work out, I promise." He sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing deepened, her small frame sinking into dreams untouched by worry. Then he rose, standing in the doorway a moment longer, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The apartment was quiet now, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the muted sounds of Charleston, beyond the window-distant voices. The creak of a carriage wheel, the river carrying twilight on its surface. Elias leaned against the doorframe, his thoughts circling back to Clara. Who was she really? The way she carried herself, the polished edges of her demeanor. The expensive bagnon of it fit the image of someone stranded alone. He shook the thought from his mind, unwilling to chase mysteries when reality demanded attention. He stepped back into the kitchen, turned off the light, and let the apartment settle into shadow. Doubt still gnawed at him, whispering that he had wasted the only chance he'd had. Yet beneath the doubt lived something firmer, the belief that he had done right, that Lila would remember his choice, not as failure, but as proof that compassion mattered more than ambition. The city outside sighed into the night, the Ashley River glowing under the last trace of sunset, pink fading into indigo. Elias stood by the window, letting the beauty anchor him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that he would face it with the same quiet determination that had carried him this far. And as he finally lay down on the couch, fatigue wrapping around him, he had no idea that his story was already shifting in ways he couldn't yet imagine. 3 days later, the apartment bore the marks of ordinary struggle. Leela's toys littered the living room floor, plastic animals tipped on their sides, puzzle pieces scattered beneath the couch, crayons rolling dangerously close to the heater. The coffee table sagged under piles of unopened mail and a stack of resumes he no longer had the heart to send. Elias sat on the edge of the couch, shoulders hunched, running a hand through his unshaven hair. The faint drip of the leaky faucet kept rhythm with his unease, reminding him of every small thing left unfixed. He had told Lila they would be fine, had smiled through dinner and made her laugh at bedtime. But inside he carried the weight of failure heavier than any storm. The phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating against chipped laminate. He glanced at it, expecting another reminder of overdue bills or a notice from the school. The number was unfamiliar, the digits crisp and unrecognized. He considered ignoring it, then picked up, pressing the phone against his ear. Elias Hart. The voice on the other end was firm, yet composed, carrying a calm authority that seemed to command attention even through static. "Yes," he answered cautiously. "This is Clara Beaumont." His body went still, the name cracking through. His memory like thunder. Clara, the woman in the rain. The injured stranger, the one whose ankle he had wrapped with shaking hands. He rose from the couch so abruptly that a toy clattered underfoot. "You," he whispered, as though speaking louder might shatter the moment. Clara's voice held no trace of the vulnerability he had seen in the cafe. Now it was polished, deliberate. "I wanted to thank you again for your help the other day. I wasn't in a position to explain, but I think you deserve to know who I am." Elias paced slowly, his gaze sweeping across the mess of the apartment. "Who are you?" His voice cracked, half disbelief, half nervous laughter. "Clara Beaumont," she said evenly, "CEO of Palmetto Solutions." The word slammed into him with such force that he sank back onto the couch. His breath caught in his throat. Palmetto Solutions? The very company where his absence had already cost him the one chance at change. He stared at the crooked stack of resumes on the table, suddenly absurd in their futility. "You're what?" he managed.
Ow!
Clara continued, her tone steady. "I recognized your name. Your application was on my desk before the storm. When I realized it was you who stopped that day, who missed the interview to help a stranger, I knew I needed to speak with you directly." Elias rubbed his temples, trying to reconcile the image of the soaked, injured woman clutching a broken heel with the commanding presence now speaking through his phone. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "I thought I'd lost everything by helping you." A pause lingered on the line, followed by Clara's measured response. "You didn't lose anything, Elias. You showed me something rare. In my world, people chase ambition with blinders on. But you, when faced with the choice between your future and a stranger, you chose compassion. That tells me more about your character than any interview ever could." His heart thudded in his chest, heavy and unsteady. Lila peeked from her bedroom doorway, rubbing her eyes, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Elias motioned gently for her to wait, his voice trembling. As he asked, "Why are you telling me this?" Clara's answer came without hesitation. "Because I want to offer you the role. Director of Operations. No interview necessary." The room tilted. He gripped the edge of the couch, staring at the floor where crayons rolled beneath his feet. "I what?" His voice was barely audible. Clara's tone softened slightly as though she sensed his disbelief. "You've already proven the kind of leader you are. The company needs people who understand sacrifice, people who act for more than themselves. That's what I saw in you." He swallowed hard, his throat dry, emotions colliding inside him, relief, shock, gratitude, and fear all at once. The sounds of Charleston seeped faintly through the window, seagulls crying over the harbor. The distant toll of bells, the faint rush of cars returning to the streets after rain. It grounded him, reminded him he was still here, still standing. In the small apartment where hope had seemed so thin only minutes before, Lila padded into the room, tugging at his sleeve. "Who is it, Daddy?" Her eyes wide with curiosity. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, barely able to form words. Clara's voice broke the silence again. "Elias, I need an answer soon, but not this moment. Think about it. Reflect on what this means for you and your daughter. Just know, the offer is real." Elias pressed a hand to his face, unable to stop the rush of emotion. His chest felt heavy, tears threatening as he whispered, "I don't know what to say." Clara paused, her own voice touched with sincerity. "Say yes when you're ready." The call ended with a quiet click, leaving Elias in stunned silence. Lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen as if it might explain what had just happened. Lila climbed into his lap, her rabbit clutched against her chest. "What happened?" she asked softly. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair, overwhelmed. "Something good," he managed, voice shaking. The toys scattered across the floor no longer looked like clutter, but anchors to the life he had fought so hard to hold together. The dripping faucet still echoed, but now it sounded less like failure and more like persistence. He thought back to that storm, the moment he chose compassion over ambition, and realized it had not destroyed his future. It had remade it. He whispered more to himself than to anyone ever had a life-changing surprise. Share your story. The words carried into the quiet apartment, lingering in the air like a vow. Lila looked up at him, eyes bright, sensing change even if she didn't understand the details. "Daddy," she said, "you're smiling." Outside, Charleston moved in rhythm with the harbor. Bells tolling, gulls calling, the river reflecting the soft light of dusk. The city felt alive with possibility, as though it had been waiting for this exact turn. Elias tightened his arms. Around Lila, his heart still pounding as the enormity of Clara's offer settled over him. The director role. The morning sun broke gently across Charleston, streaking the horizon with gold and pale rose, the kind of light that softened even the sharp edges of worry. Elias sat at the small kitchen table, the offer still ringing in his mind like a bell. He couldn't silence. Clara Beaumont, CEO of Palmetto Solutions, had offered him the director role outright. He traced the rim of his coffee mug with one finger, the ceramic warm against his skin, but his hand still trembled slightly. Gratitude swelled in his chest, yet so did disbelief. He had spent years chasing stability, convinced that each failure was proof that opportunity would never come. Now, out of nowhere, the very company he thought he had lost had placed the future in his hands. Lila bounded into the kitchen, her small feet padding across the worn linoleum. She climbed onto a chair, clutching her stuffed rabbit, and beamed. "You look happy today," she said. Elias smiled, though the weight of decision pressed behind his ribs. "I think we might be starting a new chapter," he told her softly. She tilted her head, curious, but before she could ask more, his phone buzzed against the counter. He glanced at the screen. Clara Beaumont. His pulse raced as he answered. "Mr. Hart." Clara's voice carried calm, assurance, measured and steady, the voice of someone who rarely wavered. "I hope you've had time to think." Elias's throat tightened. "I have," he said, his voice shaky. He looked around at the apartment the cracked tiles, the faded wallpaper, the refrigerator covered in Lila's drawings. He thought of the bills tucked into the drawer, the sacrifices stacked like bricks around his life. "I can't tell you how unexpected this is. I keep wondering if it's real." Clara's tone softened. "It's real. And it's yours. If you'll take it. The position isn't about resumes anymore. It's about who you are. I saw it when you stayed behind that day. Need people who act for more than themselves." Her words steadied him, even as disbelief lingered. A hand against his knee, grounding himself. "I've spent so long fighting for scraps. I don't know what it feels like to be trusted with something this big," he admitted. "You'll grow into it," Clara replied with quiet certainty. "You already carry the qualities we value. Most integrity, empathy, resolve. The rest can be taught." Elias closed his eyes, letting the reassurance wash over him. Still, fear whispered at the edges. What if he failed? What if this new role demanded more than he could give? He opened his eyes and saw Lila watching him, her wide eyes filled with faith. That was the answer, wasn't it? Every decision had. Always circled back to her. Later that afternoon, Elias took Lila to the park near the waterfront, the air warm and salty from the harbor. Palmetto trees swayed overhead, their fronds whispering with the breeze. He pushed her gently on the swing, her laughter rising like music above the creak of the chains. The city bustled in the background street, musicians playing faint jazz, vendors calling along the sidewalks, the distant toll of church bells rolling through the air. Elias's worn shoes dug into the mulch with each push, anchoring him too. The moment. "Higher, Daddy," Lila cried, clutching the chains. He obliged, sending her soaring, her hair flying like a banner. Watching her, Elias felt the knot in his chest loosen. For so long, life had been about survival, about scraping by one bill at a time. For the first time, hope shimmered in reach. He caught his breath, realizing how strange it felt to dream without fear of collapse. He sat on the swing beside her when she slowed, the metal frame creaking. She leaned against him, eyes bright. "So, "What's the new chapter?" she asked again. He ruffled her hair. "It's a job, a really good one. The kind that could mean a better place to live. Better school supplies. Maybe even that rabbit backpack you've been wanting." Her gasp was immediate. "Really?" He nodded. "Really, but it means I'll have to work harder than ever." Her hand slipped into his, small, but sure, you always do. The simplicity of her trust nearly undid him. He looked out, toward the water, the Ashley River gleaming under the sun, and thought of Clara's words, integrity, empathy, resolve. They weren't just qualities for a job. They were qualities he had fought to embody for Leela. He realized then that his fear wasn't of failure, was of believing he didn't deserve this chance. Yet as Leela's fingers curled tighter around his hand, he understood he owed it to her to step into the future with courage. The phone buzzed again, Clara's number lighting the screen. He answered, his voice steadier this time. "Mr. Hart," she said, "I won't press, but the board needs to know if you'll accept. This is your moment." Elias glanced at Lila, who leaned against him, humming to herself, her shoes scuffing the dirt. He thought of all the nights he had gone hungry so she wouldn't, of the times he had chosen decency over convenience, of the storm that had nearly drowned his hope, but instead delivered a path he never expected. He inhaled deeply, the salt air filling his lungs. "I'll accept," he said, his voice firm, resonant with both relief and duty. For a moment silence stretched on the line. Then Clara responded, "Good. You won't regret this." The confidence in her tone steadied him further. He looked at Lila, who squealed with joy even though she didn't fully understand. "Daddy got the job," she shouted, hopping from the swing and dancing across the mulch. His laughter rose freely for the first time in years. "What choice shaped your life? Let us know," the thought echoed in his mind, not as a rhetorical question, but as a testament to the moment. This choice, this leap, would shape not only his path, but Lila's as well. It would carry them both into a future that once felt unreachable. As the sun lowered, painting the park in amber light, Elias felt the weight on his shoulders shift. It wasn't gone responsibility, never would be, but it felt lighter, infused, with hope instead of despair. He stood, taking Leela's hand as they walked toward home. The city around them pulsed with life. Magnolias blooming along the cobblestone streets, jazz spilling softly from doorways. Everything felt alive with promise. Elias tightened his grip on Lila's hand, the mix of relief and duty anchoring him. He had stepped into a storm and chosen compassion over ambition, and somehow that choice had led here to hope, to acceptance, to a future waiting to be built. Elias adjusted the knot of his new tie in the mirror, its navy fabric smooth and unfrayed, a small detail that still amazed him. Morning light streamed through the windows of the apartment, larger and brighter than the one he and Lila had left. Behind, the walls no longer bore peeling wallpaper but were freshly painted in soft cream, and the hum of the refrigerator no longer competed with a leaky faucet. Lila darted around the living room, her laughter ringing out as she zipped her brand-new backpack, a bright rabbit stitched across the front. "Look, Daddy," she called, spinning in a circle. The straps fit her perfectly, no longer frayed, or held together by his careful stitching. Elias smiled, heart swelling as he watched her joy. This was the life he had promised her, the life he once feared would always be just beyond reach. Their mornings had taken on a new rhythm. Breakfast was no longer a rushed affair of stale cereal, but eggs, toast, and fruit laid out neatly on the table. Elias would sip his coffee, reading through notes for the day's meetings at Palmetto Solutions, while Leela chattered about school projects, her words spilling as quickly as her excitement. Then, together, they would walk down Charleston's cobblestone streets, magnolias blooming overhead, their fragrance heavy and sweet in the warm air. Elise's worn shoes, though polished now, still carried the creases of years of strain, a quiet reminder of where he had come from. He wore them proudly, grounding himself in humility. At Palmetto Solutions, the work was demanding, but Elias thrived. The office overlooked the harbor, gulls wheeling across the sky, bells tolling faintly from distant churches. He poured himself into the role with the same persistence he had once used to stretch paychecks and mend clothes. His colleagues quickly learned his style: steady, empathetic, unwilling to overlook the smallest detail. He led with the same philosophy that had guided him in the storm: people first, always. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it no longer crushed him. It lifted him, reminding him that every choice mattered. One afternoon, Clara Beaumont requested a meeting. Her presence still carried authority, but Elias had begun to see beneath the surface. Invited him to a quiet cafe tucked along a narrow Charleston lane, its iron lamps flickering as dusk fell. Over cups of dark coffee, Clara's polished demeanor softened. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze distant for a moment before she spoke. "You know," she said quietly, "strength doesn't always come from climbing higher. Sometimes it comes from surviving what breaks you." Elias studied her, sensing the weight in her tone. Clara continued, her voice steady but laced with memory. "I lost my husband 8 years ago. Cancer. Quick. Merciless. I buried myself in this company afterward, convinced that building it stronger would fill the void. Out. But the truth is, I forgot how to let people in. That day in the storm, I felt something I hadn't in years: someone choosing to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. It reminded me that vulnerability doesn't erase strength." Elias listened quietly, humbled by her honesty. In that moment, Clara was no longer just the CEO who had given him a second chance. She was a woman who had endured, who had stitched herself back together through loss. Her revelation made her human in a way he hadn't expected, and he nodded slowly. "Sometimes kindness feels like weakness," he said softly, "but it's the only thing that's ever truly saved me." Clara's eyes flickered with gratitude, though she quickly returned to her composed self. "Then carry it with you. This company needs that heart." Days flowed into weeks, and Elias and Lila settled into their new life. Their apartment overlooked a park where gas lamps glowed at night, casting soft light across the cobblestones. Lila filled the space with laughter and drawings that now hung neatly on the fridge, taped with pride. She had her rabbit backpack, new shoes, and fresh crayons that never broke mid-sketch. Yet for all the improvements, Elias remained unchanged in spirit. He still knelt to tie her laces, still walked her to school each morning, still told her bedtime stories with the same tenderness he always had. One Saturday, they strolled through Charleston's historic district. The streets buzzed with music, magnolia petals drifting across the path like confetti. Elias pointed out the iron gates that curled like lace, the old houses painted in pastels, the carriages rolling past with their rhythmic clatter. Lila skipped ahead, her laughter echoing against the stone. She turned back suddenly, her eyes wide with thought. "Daddy," she said, "why did you help that lady in the storm if it meant missing your job?" Elias crouched, meeting her gaze. The memory of that day rippled through him, not as regret, but as affirmation. "Because sometimes doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy," he said. She tilted her head, considering his words. "Even if it costs you something." He smiled gently. "Especially then. Kindness isn't about what you get back. It's about what you give, even when it's hard." She slipped her small hand into his, her grip firm. "Then I'll always try to do that too." The promise in her voice settled into him like sunlight, warming the places that had once been filled with doubt. Together, they continued down the cobblestone path, magnolias blooming above, the city alive with light and music. That evening, as he tucked Lila into bed, she pointed to the newest drawing taped above her headboard.
Oh.
It was a picture of 2 figures. Under a rainbow, one tall, one small, holding hands. Beside them stood a woman with long hair, smiling, her ankle wrapped in a bandage. Elias chuckled softly. "That's us?" he asked. Lila nodded proudly. "And her was helping her." "Helped us." Elias kissed her forehead, his heart swelling. "That's exactly right," he whispered. As she drifted into sleep, he stood by the window, watching Charleston's lamps glow against the night. The city seemed different, now still the same. Streets, still the same river, but colored by hope instead of hardship. His life had not been transformed by... The streets of Charleston glowed with 1,000 colors, as evening descended, transforming the historic district into a celebration alive with music and light. Strings of lanterns hung between palmetto trees, their warm radiance swaying in the breeze, casting golden halos on cobblestones polished by countless footsteps. Booths lined the festival paths, filled with food sizzling on grills, sweet pralines wrapped in paper, and children racing past with painted faces. The air carried a symphony of scents, dressmen drifting from nearby gardens, roasted corn, and fried dough dusted with sugar. Above it all, music poured from a small stage where local bands played with heart. Violins and guitars weaving melodies that felt older than the streets themselves. Amid the swirl of life, Elias walked with Lila's small hand curled in his own, her bright rabbit backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she pointed excitedly at each wonder. They passed. It was a world away from the dim apartment they had. Once endured, the leaky faucet and peeling wallpaper now replaced by laughter, color, and promise. Elias breathed deeply, feeling the rhythm of the crowd and the pulse of gratitude in his chest. He had chosen kindness that stormy day, and it had reshaped his entire world. As lantern light flickered across Lila's eager face, he reflected on how one decision, helping a stranger when everything told him to keep running, had carried him to this moment. The director role at Palmetto Solutions had brought stability, but more than that, it had brought dignity. A reminder that compassion was never wasted. Lila tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, look, fireworks," she pulled him toward the square where the crowd gathered. All eyes lifted toward the sky. The first flare burst above the Ashley River, scattering sparks of crimson across the water. Lila gasped, clapping her hands, her laughter mingling with the cheers of strangers. Elias lifted her onto his shoulders, her small arms outstretched, as if she could catch the stars. The brilliance reflected in her wide eyes was brighter than any firework. And he knew that this was the reward he had been searching for all along. As the sky lit again and again, Elias thought of Clara. He remembered her vulnerability in the storm, her revelation over coffee, the humanity she had hidden beneath layers of command. He realized her decision to trust him was also an act of compassion, one that mirrored his own. Kindness had met kindness, and together they had built something new. He turned his gaze to Lila and whispered, "See, sweetheart, this is why we help people. Sometimes it changes more than just their day, changes our whole life." As she leaned down, her cheek pressed against his hair. "I'll always remember." Her words, simple and pure, carried more weight than any applause. Around them, Charleston pulsed with joy. Magnolias in bloom along the festival edges, gas lamps flickering as if keeping time with the music, families gathered close. Life no longer felt like survival. It felt like a gift, one worth sharing. Elias lowered Lila from his shoulders as the fireworks faded, guiding her to a bench beneath the lanterns. He knelt, meeting her bright gaze. "Do you know the most important thing I've learned?" She tilted her head, curious. He smiled softly. "That kindness doesn't end with us. Pass it forward. Every time we choose to care, even when it costs us something, we plant a seed that grows in ways we can't see." She nodded solemnly, clutching his hand. "So I should always help, even if it's hard. Especially then," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "'Cause one act of kindness can change everything." The crowd roared as the final firework bloomed overhead, cascading gold and silver across the night. Elias looked upward, tears stinging his eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. He thought of every sacrifice, every doubt, every moment when he wondered if he had failed his daughter. Tonight, standing among strangers who celebrated without knowing his story, he felt whole. He turned his gaze back to the path they had walked, trend-drenched streets, missed chances, and a storm that had seemed like ruin but became salvation. The lesson was clear and unshakable. What you give without expectation returns in ways beyond imagination. And now, to those listening, Elias's story carried more than memory. It carried a call. His voice rose not in speech but in spirit, echoing through the festival lights and the quiet of hearts tuned to hear. If this story touched you, like, subscribe, and share a time you help someone. It could inspire others. His journey had proven that even the smallest act of compassion could ripple outward, transforming lives, weaving hope where despair once lived. Charleston's night shimmered with possibility. Lanterns glowing like stars brought down to earth. Elias stood with Lila's hands secure in his own, their faces lit by both light and hope. The world was unpredictable, but the truth was certain. Kindness had changed his life, and it could change countless others. The music swelled, the crowd cheered, and the story closed not as an ending, but as an invitation for every listener, every witness, to carry that same choice forward into their own lives.